So a man arrives at the gates of heaven. St. Peter asks, "Religion?" The man says, "Methodist." St. Peter looks down at his list and says, "Go to room 24, but be very quiet as you pass room 8. Next person arrives at the gates. "Religion?" "Baptist." "Okay, go to room 18, but be very quiet as you pass room 8. A third soul arrives. "Religion?" "Jewish." "Okay, go to room 11, but be very quiet as you pass room 8. And the person says, "I've been hearing you say that. And okay, but why must I be quiet when I pass room 8? St. Peter tells them, "Well, the Jehovah's Witnesses are in room 8, and we don't want to upset them. You see, they think they're the only ones here." It's kind of a funny joke. When I tell it, people tend to laugh, but then there's the odd person who says, "Really? You think Jehovah's Witnesses would be in heaven?" Or another might say, "Wow, Jews, very, very universalist of you." So I found that the genre of heaven jokes, and there are very many of them, reveals two things about us. One, we don't really know what heaven is like. So we use all kinds of very worldly reference points that we do understand. Heaven seems to be some kind of destination, like a super holy, fabulous resort with a very judgy gatekeeper. And second, the jokes tend to reflect a lot of curiosity about who gets in and who doesn't. This joke even implies that heaven is segregated by denomination. That's the part that's not really that funny to me. So that leads me to another story about walking with my sister in West Lynn here on Earth. There are a lot of windy streets nestled into hillsides up here with subdivisions with names like Churchill Arms and Heron Point and such, ranging from fairly to very well-heeled. And in the middle of one very well-heeled subdivision, far from any main roads or traffic noise, and around a number of curves is a gated community. So we like to ask ourselves when we walk by, are we the riffraff that they want to keep out? Now, no judgment on those who live in gated communities. You can't get into the really nice apartment buildings either without codes and keys, and safety, security, and privacy are a thing in the world because we're living amidst sin. But as to the dream of God, do we really think it involves walls and fences that separate us from each other, barriers to keep people out? Is heaven open only to the respectable, the well-mannered, the housed, the literate, or the able-bodied? The right to Episcopalians. Do we really think heaven is a gated community? Now, Christians have different opinions about who gets into heaven and how and when, regardless of what the Congregationalists or Catholics or Presbyterians or Anglicans might say. What Jesus seems to be telling us today is, stop thinking about that. It's none of our business. What is our business is that we have been called to join with Jesus to usher in the kingdom of God. That is our business. For as it says in Luke, the Spirit of the Lord has anointed Jesus to bring good news to the poor, to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, and to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. That's supposed to be happening now, not in heaven. And anything that keeps people from liberation, from recovery, from freedom, from oppression, is a stumbling block, and it is not of God. In Mark's gospel last week, Jesus spoke of the children as the icon of these least ones, the most vulnerable, the most powerless of all. They are the reason we are here. They are the ones we need to lift up, and they are the ones we are to serve, to heal, to free, and to welcome into our fold. And so how does that jibe with what we hear in our gospel? The disciples coming back from their day of teaching and healing and proclaiming in the world, and they tell Jesus, Jesus, we found these guys healing and casting out demons, but they were doing it wrong. We tried to stop them, but they just kept on doing it. Big sigh. Jesus is like, okay, let me get this straight. They were actually people. They were casting out demons. And you tried to... Is that what you're telling me? Well, the poor disciples. Now, Mark's gospel is known for its disparaging portrayal of the disciples compared to the portrayals in other gospels. But I've been thinking that really they're kind of normal people. They're sincere, they love Jesus, they want to please Jesus, and they struggle constantly to understand what they're a part of. They can't hold on to the big picture. They don't really have the long view. Now, they have their moments, but they often focus on the wrong things. They're a lot like us. So anyway, Jesus blows his stack. Here is our gentle Jesus telling them, if you are a stumbling block to someone else's salvation, cut your hand off, cut your foot off, gouge your own eye out. Wow. Well, one preacher said, this is the passage that really tests the limits of people who call themselves literalists. Even they don't come to church with bandaged eyes claiming, well, the Bible told me to do it. So yes, this is bona fide hyperbole. It is extreme exaggeration. As someone once said, hyperbole is literally killing us. It is language to shock, to startle. It is the smack on the side of the head that the disciples seem to need. So no, don't try this at home. But consider that Jesus is running out of time. He's on his way to Jerusalem to face the cross. He needs them to feel the urgency of their call for their own sakes, but even more for the sake of the least ones. Instead, they are getting in the way of the work of the kingdom. They are fencing themselves off instead of bringing people along. It is not easy to be a follower of Christ. The way of the cross is not an easy one. We do not need, therefore, to create a kind of hell around us by clinging to our own sins and stumbling blocks. We should be allowing Jesus, in his mercy, to remove them. Whoever is not against us is for us, Jesus says. That is a long way from make sure they're doing it the way we do. So what would it be like if in our discipleship we focused on making it easier for more people to come to the table? It would require us to hold the way we do things lightly, lest we learn that they are getting in others' way. It would require us to consider what is getting in our way. So imagine a newcomer from a charismatic church removing stumbling blocks for an old-time Episcopalian. Imagine a liberal clearing a path for a conservative. Imagine a soldier's story of sacrifice opening the heart of an avowed anti-war activist. Imagine an insider welcoming an outsider. Imagine someone who can recite Rite 2 Prayer A of the Eucharist in their sleep, being moved beyond measure by a bilingual Spanish-English service. Imagine a YouTube video moving someone to tears who thought only the hymnal could do that. Or imagine singing a medieval chant opened the heart of a teenager. What if while looking into the eyes of a farm worker, our own stumbling block fell and we saw the face of Christ? What if a sacred ground session opened our eyes to why we remain largely a church of people who look like us? This week in a Zoom morning prayer, I was reminded that stumbling blocks can be simply our habits. For someone new to our liturgy, the Book of Common Prayer, for instance, is a maze. We can help with that. We've learned that having Zoom worship removes stumbling blocks for some. Let's keep thinking about how those who need to be at home keep feeling the fullness of their belonging here. We're a church of older people. Once vaccines for the youngest children become available, let's commit to removing any obstacles to their feeling loved and welcomed home to this place in every way. The more I preach the gospel, the more awestruck I am by how radical is Jesus' hospitality and openness and inclusiveness. I sense Jesus would weep knowing there are still jokes about heaven as a place of rooms full of just Methodists or any other group. If that's not what heaven is supposed to be like, then it's also not what we are to aspire to on earth. So what would it truly look like to follow our patronal saint's exhortation to prepare the way of the Lord? Notwithstanding a few patched eyes or missing limbs among us, I think we'd be opening doors, finding new partners, reaching out at least one hand, making sure that if anyone loses their way in this crazy world, it is not on our account. So here's another heaven joke. Jesus encounters Peter on a stroll one day and asks him how it's going. Peter says, "Well, Lord, you know, I love my job, but I'm kind of frazzled. I mean, I'm really trying to make sure that everyone gets in who deserves to get in. But I'm still running into people here and there who didn't check all the boxes. I have no idea how they're getting in." And Jesus says, "Probably my mom. Word is that she hangs out by the back entrance and lets all kinds of people in. And you know, who am I to argue with the Queen of Heaven?" Now that's a joke we can live into. Amen.